Hello, everyone. How are you? This is Carly Cylinder of Flower LA Inc. and author of The Flower Chef. I'm so glad you're here. And for those listening to the replay, welcome. So, today I'm going to be talking to you about designing for corporate accounts and brands. Most of my clients are beauty, fashion, and tech. Most of the work I do, I'm getting hired by a client who has a client. So, it can be a little complicated. I'm going to go over the different types of clients. So, corporate design client reasons that someone wants their flowers a certain way. So, they either want a bang for their budget, they want to match the venue and brand, something specific that their client wants, or the best scenario, they're trusting my design abilities, which is even better, and they have a huge budget. Now, a lot of times these clients are looking to me, but other times they have their own exact version that they just want me to do, which is totally fine. I'm there to please. So, the first type of design I'm going to talk about are designs based on client sketches or their specific ideas. So, like I said, sometimes they'll just present to me a CAD, like a 3D computer drawing, and this is their vision, this is what they want. So, I'm going to show you some examples. Now, this is what I did for Secret. They had 10 installations. It was mayhem. It took about 4 days and a big team. So they had a mock-up of what they wanted this to look like, and I have to figure out the mechanics. So we did use some mainly chicken wire, and I used real greenery and then some real flowers, and then fake produce. And it's up to me to supply all that. So that is just something I take into budget consideration. The next one we have is for La Mercier. So they wanted to do the hanging greenery. Now we did about, I can't remember, 5 to 7 of them. And that sign that has the roses around, I had no idea what we were going to do. And I kind of had to improvise that day. So basically for the hanging ones, I used insulation panels wrapped in chicken wire, and then I think we used bind wire to attach them to a pole. And the client was very happy. There wasn't a lot of direction on that. They just had the look. This was my first big install. I honestly wasn't sure how I was going to do it. They wanted a flower entrance. And so originally I was going to do a hedge wall, which would have been a nightmare to cover all the flowers. And a fabricator happened to be on site during the walkthrough, and I said, is this something you could build? And they did. They used the floral tiles, which are very expensive, but I've used for a lot of my work. And that fabricator and I created a partnership, and we worked on tons of walls together. So it was a really good opportunity. Now, this client, I was supposed to get started in the morning because we actually had 2 of these walls. They didn't let me start till 3, and I think their event was at 7, and then they were telling me to hurry up. So what I encounter a lot is that you have to be prepared to have all these other people setting up, and then they want it done for their client, but I had no time, and we actually ran out of hydrangea. So I had a guy run to Mayish LAX and just pick up, I think, 11 more boxes. It was stressful, but it came up pretty. It's very hard to do on a time crunch. Okay, this is just a simple, it's a box full of red tulips. They gave me a drawing for this, and then I have to kind of do the stem count. And you know how hard it can be to estimate and how costly it can add up. It looks like just a box of tulips, and those were cut stems. They weren't plants to get that lush look. They were happy with it in the end, but I do try to give a little wiggle room because I know we're going to have to go out and buy more. I always I buy about 75% ahead of time that I think I'll need, and then I do end up doing a second trip or having more delivered just because, I'm in the business of making money, so I don't want to have an oversupply. Okay, I had about maybe 6 days notice on this. my client, who is actually a wedding planner, but she has a corporate client, and she wanted to do this chandelier. Now, I had no idea. I wasn't actually even there for this, but I did all the ordering. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do this chandelier. It's around this existing light. And I was looking on YouTube, and the best solution I found was a hula hoop. So I ended up getting a 5-foot diameter. It's really big, weighted hula hoop, and had a lot of faith in the designers working on it. Some of those flowers are fake and some are mixed in. But this is an example of someone saying, this is what I promised my client. Their client was Murad, the skincare line. And it was up to me to figure it out. But they had a very, very specific vision. And I believe they did send me some sample images. So when it comes to that, I mean, completing that in about 6 or 7 day turnaround, again, nerve-wracking, but this is what it's like when you own and run a business. My main goal is that they're happy. And so I'm very attentive, especially with my corporate clients, checking in just to say, is this what you were thinking? Do you like it? Does your client like it? I really give a good customer service. They can text me, they can call me, and I want to beat them to the punch so that I can, fix anything they're not happy with. Of course, their client did love it. I wasn't a fan of that twine, but that's what, the designers in the end had to work with to rig it. Whenever you're doing something new, especially when it's last minute, I just have to explain that to the client, and they're generally pretty cool. It's these small details that honestly you and I would notice, but the average Joe or Jane wouldn't. Next up, okay, this was insane. So this is actually a cross-section of a molecule. They wanted a floral structure, or sculpture rather, and they had computer drawings, and so this is basically an atom, I believe. I'm not very good at chemistry, split, and I had to create this 6-foot sculpture. Again, you can't really tell the scale of it, and right in the back there's hanging purple balls that have roses all around it. So this was done in my fabricator's warehouse in Orange County, and it was delivered to the San Diego Convention Center. For this, they were spending a lot of money on this. It was for this conference. And so, again, there's a lot of pressure when you're doing something that you've never done before. For this, we could have used purple carnations. Would have been a lot easier. A lot easier, because it ended up looking just like a bought purple carnation. But they didn't want that. They wanted a very specific Pantone purple, which I had to find the closest shade. I had to do different samples, send them photos, and get that approved by their planner and then the pharmaceutical company. So there's a lot of people involved. That whole structure is about 6 feet. So I think it took 8 of us, 1 or 2 full days, full time, and they were happy. I was pretty nervous, but it was for 3 days, and just because there's so much spray paint on it, it did start to wilt, I think, after a day or 2, but they seemed totally fine with it. So that's when you have to be flexible with your clients, and inside you might be super frustrated and say, I could just use purple carnations, or I know better, trust me. But, actually my therapist had to say, this is what you do for your living, so you better be nice. And, I think about that from time to time. In corporate design, you are working with a lot of people, and you do actually have to be pretty firm. Nice but firm. You're the expert, and you have to let them know. And I did let them know that, after 3 days with that much spray paint, it's not going to look that good. So managing expectations when designing for corporate is very important. Be honest. Okay, next up, we're going to do designs based on my own ideas or sketches that need to be approved, and they're usually not revised. So this is where I come up with something. and they want me to sketch it out. I'm a terrible sketcher, and it kind of, when I sketch, it looks like a Frank Gehry drawing, just some squiggle lines. Now this, they came to me and they wanted a chair covered in moss, which was very cool. And it was for a pasta sauce company. Pretty random, I know. This was in New York. So I figured, okay, I can cover it with moss and this greenery, but they wanted the ingredients of the sauce. So they wanted herbs, they wanted basil. They wanted that whole thing covered also in basil. And I said, well, you've cut basil before and it wilts right away. And so that's just not going to work. And so that's, again, an example of being firm, because it is your job, it's your work, and you want to make sure that you're not going to look bad. So I propose that we used basil plants, and I believe they sourced those, and I just created those little mounds underneath. It just made sense to me. That little corner of greenery I just improvised on site. And again, I'm getting their approval the whole time, but it came out great. It was super fun. These are kind of the corporate events that I feel like everyone wants, because they're just fun, and it's just a way to express yourself. Those are far and few between. Okay, this is just a pretty arrangement. Now, I put this on here because I did a flower wall for them for the Nashville Edit magazine launch. And the thing about this is I wanted to use rose gold. So that was kind of my idea. Here's the flower wall for Maleficent. Now, I don't know if it was Disney or the studio, or that would be the same, but the studio. I can't remember who had to approve it, but I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I never even saw the first one. And so they did want to sketch. They had a small budget. And I knew I couldn't do the back all in flowers, and the fabricator and printer actually said they could cover the whole thing, which is something I do want to do because it is very economic to do, especially on a low budget. So when you're designing for corporate, you really kind of want to think of all the options, and that can be hard. I'm always asking the designers I work with, and I just kind of Google things, Pinterest things. I decided to use branches and went downtown and got lots of those little manzanitas, and it did come out pretty cool. I mean, I loved it. It came out actually pretty close to the sketch, and I actually did a giant centerpiece on the table that I kind of had to figure out once I was on site. But my designers were creating this, and I sort of just watched on. And I'll be very specific with the placement. So at the end of the day, it is your vision, even if you have people working for you. All right, so we're going to do designs that are based on the budget I have, and I am strict about that. So lots of people, as you know, want to do amazing, luxurious things, and they don't have a budget. And again, going back to managing expectations, whether that is a wedding or a corporate event, a brand launch, anything like that. So I just say this is what can be done within the budget. Again, when you make money, not a big issue. It's just I need to know, I want to maximize your budget. And I don't do that back and forth where they say, what's this going to cost? I say, no, what's your budget? So I can let you know and give you options of what can be done. And if they don't want to give it, I will just throw a number out there and I'll gauge their reaction, basically, and say, am I in the ballpark? You always want to do that before starting your designs. This was for Burt's Bees. They wanted wildflowers. I loved how this came out. This was in New York. And this client, and I have some clients like this, that they want to know all the flowers you're using. They don't care about They care about the design, but what's important is the actual flowers. And I have a couple of very picky clients that do that, or they just love flowers. And for that, I'll make a Pinterest board and I'll just say, tell me which ones you don't like or anything I absolutely can't use. And then I'll just keep that in mind when I'm doing the buying. As far as the buying goes for these kinds of events, I usually have an idea in my mind, and then I just let how I want to have the freedom, to design, I let my vendors just pick out something in the color palette, and they generally will do a great job, better than I could do. And I just do the same thing. I give them a budget. I say, stay within this. I need to do this amount, cover this amount, and it just works out. It's easy. Okay, this was a corporate event for a finance company, a hedge fund, and they wanted it sort of roaring 20s, so they asked for the feathers, and I picked out some bases. Normally I'll stick to plain, but this did seem a little glitzy. Now, talking about styles that was more compact, this is for the new Rams and Chargers stadium, but this was for the office for that and their main headquarters. So for this, they'll give me the color palette. So they wanted blues and whites, and I will add in greenery. And because this building is very modern and masculine, I want to create something that reflects that, and that's not out of place. I would never put a rustic wildflower arrangement in here. A lot of florists, they only do one style, and I think that's pretty cool to have sort of the signature. But if you really want to do corporate work, you have to be able to be versatile with your design abilities. So this is structured. I added the little succulent in there. With the delphinium, I created those kind of lines, and they were super happy with it. This is one of my favorite arrangements and events I did for them. And I will usually always keep it compact just because of, the place it's at. But I try to vary it up as far as the design goes. And they appreciate that. I mean, it does get hard sometimes doing the same color palette and same style, but I try to mix it up. You wanna impress them every time. That's why they keep coming back. Okay, this was a little bit crazy. So that's all grapevine, and I can't remember if I or the client had the idea for this, but those were way too big for the table, and we made it work, and it actually ended up pretty cool. Has this beach theme. None of those flowers were in water. I did a flower wall for this too, and it turned out great. I like to use those grapevines because they're reusable and they just look beautiful. They require minimal flowers and it's easy to set up. So that's a great thing to propose to clients. And there I am. Just wanted to remind you what I look like. That was at the Field to Vase dinner a few years ago, and I was very exhausted then. It's at the Flower Fields in Carlsbad. So right now I'm going to talk about designs that were improvised completely on site. That's really crazy. Either the client never got back to me, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, the PR firm, their client, and then their client's client. So I had to just show up and make it work with no idea what I was doing. It is nerve-wracking. It causes me a lot of stress. This was for BravoCon in New York. I knew what I was doing for their main installation, but they didn't give me access to this because they were setting up everything else, even though I said, please, please, please. They didn't give me access to it probably until 2 hours before. It was a really large surface space, and I didn't know the design at all. Those are some fake flowers that we were going to use in this other part, and I had a ton of greenery. They ended up changing the sign. I mean, it was like, okay, what are we going to do? And I have to act like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Not only that, I have all these executives watching on, and I'm like, shoot, okay. And so I'll confer with, everyone that's working, and ultimately I do just have to make a decision. We've already been there like 10 hours. I'm exhausted, and they need this up, and they're saying, okay, you have to be done in a half hour, an hour. Again, like I was saying about the other jobs, because their clients are coming in, and I want to be like, I've been telling you for 8 hours I need access. So when that happens, I try to get ahead as much as possible without being able to do the install. And me and two other ladies were just kind of binding together. I forget what we used. I think we used zip ties. Just bunching those leaves together. And it took a long time to even fill one square. That's when we realized, uh-oh. And I mean, it turned out, as good as it could be given 2 hours. You got to be easy on yourself, in those times. It is what it is. Okay, this was not even added at all on their order. My clients brought these stands, and they were hollow. There's not even anything on there. And they said, can't you use your leftover flowers? And I'm like, I didn't even budget for this. And they said, well, we see you have that. And I was just like, oh my God. And someone lived pretty close and grabbed just 2 wood boxes they had, which we put on the bottom. And it was just me and a girl. We started zip tying all those flowers onto this. And yeah, so that was completely improvised. This is another one where, at least with this one, I had some semblance of the idea, but I didn't really know the size or the structure. And the client kept calling and texting because I couldn't be there for this one. And you know what? You go above and beyond. You bribe the designers working, and you just ask them to please, stay late. So these are some typical designs based on my judgment of the client's main priority. So this is where I just kind of do something. It's based on the color palette and style and not the type of flower. People want a bang for their buck. They look at volume, not types of flowers. You have to keep that in mind with corporate. This was for a Fox event, I believe, so very modern and tight. And then this was a beauty event, and just soft and pretty. Again, it's kind of like, it's like shooting a dart in the dark and just saying a prayer. Lots of times I'm like, oh my God, I hope they like it. So again, focus on yeah, exactly. Focus on the color palette and not the materials. Again, this was just colorful, cheery. I did a lot of arrangements, and it turned out very pretty. I used a lot of greenery on the bottom just to give it that volume because I was short on flowers for their budget. So as long as it's all concealed, the client will generally be happy. And normally corporate clients are great because they're not spending their own money. They're spending their company's money. And I'll try to get them under budget if possible because I want them to look good. So keep that in mind. It's very different dealing with a corporate client and a brand than someone's own personal flowers of a wedding or their own party or bar mitzvah. This is just something, traditional. This was in New York. So again, these designs are very traditional, not too original, but I try to match it to the setting. I forget what this was for the event, but this was in New York, and I thought the palette just matched so beautifully. The wallpaper and just the different textures. This is definitely more rustic. So you can see, again, the variety of styles. That's very important. You're not designing for yourself. You're designing for the client and their event, and you really have to keep that in mind. So that's just one example of a more rustic. Sometimes I just call something more rustic, modern. That's rustic to me, though. Okay, this is for a nonprofit event. You can see I try to be very economical. I use the hydrangeas, delphiniums, and snapdragons. This is in New York, where flowers are about 3 times the price than LA. Most expensive flowers I've worked with, just as a side note, have been in Nashville and Chicago. It's crazy expensive. So this is for a nonprofit event called NAMI. It's the mental health organization, and they do a ton of stuff. I've designed for them many years. I give them a good discount. Basically do it just above cost, and it's just something I'm really happy to support. So that's another one. I wanted to keep it simple because we had like 50 arrangements, so simpler the better. Okay, this was for, I believe, American Express, and again, going back to focusing on the colors and not flowers. I use spider mums, I use stock Those are very inexpensive flowers, but I arranged it in a way that looked way more modern and sophisticated for what they were going for. And lastly, this is for e.l.f. Cosmetics. They like things, I just know they like things a little bit tighter. They told me the colors to use, so that makes it pretty easy, and it was matching the makeup palette. So I hope you can see what goes into designing these events. It's all about the client. It's all about making them look good. There I am speaking at the Knot in New Orleans. Just a reminder again of what I look like. And I hope you learned some tips and are flexible in the future and can widen and spread your services. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining me. Please stay connected. That's where you can find me, and love to you all.